Alright, so this is going to be part 2 to what if Deku had John's powers from Unordinary Remastered. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. 'Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
So in the last part, we just got done with Deku getting the recommendation for UA and getting into, or about to do the test for the recommendation. So in the last part, I asked you guys whether or not this series should have a separate timeline from the original, and not many people had said anything, so I did a poll on my community tab, and most people wanted a separate timeline. So what I mean by that is we're not gonna be going off directly off the original, so it's gonna have a lot of similarities from the original series that I made, but it's gonna have some variations, particularly with Deku's character, as not a lot of people liked as I made Deku like John, so we're not gonna do that. So let's talk about the 10 months that Deku has for training. So Deku in this time would basically work on his body a lot, because although he could copy, there's going to be situations in where he's really going to need his physical strength, particularly with quirks that don't have a physical stimuli, such as any mental type of quirks. So he's going to really need it for those scenarios. Other than that, he would also need, just in case the quirk that he has to work off of his physical strength, then that could be a real big thing to have. So there's also a second part that Deku does, and that is basically theory crafting. And what I mean by that is, since Deku, like in canon, I believe would have still had that journal in where he writes down, well, heroes and what they can do, what he likes about them, their fighting style, and all those things like that, he would also write down their quirks, and from there he would theorize on how these quirks would work and how to improve them. Because if you don't remember, in Unordinary, this is what John does. He learns more about different powers from when he first gets his power to copy, and this is where he learns how to use different powers and get better with them, and that's why he has a lot of experience using different types of powers and how he's able to use them really easily. He just has a lot of experience. So that's what Deku kind of does, kind of theorizing between different quirks. So in those 10 months, he basically becomes a master at using a lot of different quirks, theoretically. He would get better at copying powers due to his mom being able to copy her power. He really gets used to it, and therefore has a mastery over copying powers. There would be chances during these 10 months where he'd be able to copy other people's quirks as they would use them in public. Some more, well, I guess weaker than others. So it's very pick and choose, because it's not really up to him, since not a lot of people use their quirks in public, obviously. We also don't know if John can really use powers that he sees on, like say a camera. Let's see if someone like records themselves using the power. We don't know if John would be able to copy that from the footage. Probably not. He probably needs a actual person in front of him to actually do it, so we're not gonna have Deku be able to do that. So the day of the recommendation kind of exam comes around, and Deku has to participate. So Deku, in this kind of state, I think he'd be around the same strength and speed as he was in canon, just because I don't see him getting any stronger, specifically because All Might's plan for him was specifically designed for Deku's body, and I don't see him passing that. He doesn't have anything to really help him or boost his strength like that. So we could talk about how well he does during this test. So Deku, I would say that he would probably do pretty average between each of the different physical tests. So we don't know much about the recommendation. From what we've seen, it's very similar to the quirk assessment that Aizawa does, but a bit more, I guess, on a larger scale, specifically with the race. So Deku would go average on most of these until it's to the race. Now Deku has some, ideas on how to use certain powers. And with his power, well, with the power that he's copying the most, his mom, he was able to not only pick like larger objects up, but he was also able to pick himself up and use some sort of telekinesis flight to some extent. So he has a very, very good knowledge on quirks. So when he sees two people in particular that are using the quirks a lot, that'd be Todoroki and Yuarashi. Yuarashi, if you don't remember, is the person with the wind power, and obviously you know who Todoroki is. So because I would assume that Yuarashi's power of wind manipulation wouldn't be rare, because it's basically controlling over wind. And if we, as we see in My Hero, people that control elements like water, earth, and fire is pretty common. We haven't seen too many wind users, but we could assume that it's pretty common compared to all the other ones, right? It wouldn't make sense that that one would be more rare than the others. So Deku would have seen it eventually through one of the other heroes that would have a wind type quirk, and therefore would have some idea of how to use it. Obviously he's never done it in practice, but he has a lot of ideas when the race starts. This is where he would have copied Yuarashi's quirk from the earlier test. So before this, everyone thinks that Deku's kind of either quirkless or hasn't shown his quirk yet, because they don't really know what he's trying to do, because in the other physical test he hasn't really shown anything abnormal, I should say. So during this race, Deku activates the quirk. So it's a bit stronger than Yuarashi's at this current time, and what happens is, what Deku does is he condenses the air that Yuarashi usually just whirls around his body, but it's a lot more condensed, and therefore the thrust that gives Deku's body is a lot higher, and therefore he starts flying faster, and he is a lot faster than both Todoroki and Yuarashi. Todoroki isn't trying too hard as he was in canon, because if you remember, he wasn't really trying against Yuarashi, but Yuarashi was trying to win, so I guess Yuarashi would have tried to compete with Deku, but he wouldn't be able to, because Yuarashi doesn't have the same knowledge, or hasn't really thought of doing the same thing that Deku does with the condensed air and how he travels. Maybe he used it during like attacks, but he hasn't really tried it with flight, if that makes sense. So this would basically secure Deku's kind of spot in UA, specifically class 1A, because if you don't know, not everyone who gets a recommendation actually goes to class 1A. As we see, there are a couple of different class 1B students that are there. So Deku was really lucky to get into class 1A. So we could talk about the quirk assessment and the basic interactions that he has at the beginning of the first day of, I guess, school. So in this one, Deku's personality is a bit more, I guess, serious. He's closer to Todoroki than he is John, as he doesn't really see people as, well, real, but at the same time he doesn't want to make trouble for himself, and therefore he doesn't really talk to many people. But the same encounter as he has in canon, that being Deku and Bakugo meeting at UA for the first time, still kind of happens, with Bakugo talking, or really not listening to Ida as he's yelling at him. And this is where Deku would come in. Bakugo would confront Deku. Deku would act like he doesn't know Bakugo and kind of sit down, or try to, as Bakugo would kind of insist, or not really insist, but kind of call him a liar and trying to be all rude to him. This is where Ida would try to intervene, and Bakugo would say that it's not his place and to leave him alone, and Ida would continuously try to get Bakugo off of Deku. This is where Uraraka would come in, and things would start to calm down a bit, and she would introduce herself to the four that are there. Deku wouldn't say much. He would say that his name's Izuku Midoriya, and that's pretty much it. He's not flustered like he was in canon, as he's a bit more confident in his skill, as well as not really wanting to get too attached to these people, similar to Todoroki, but a bit more open, I guess. So Aizawa would come in, tell everyone about the quirk assessment, and this is where they would do the test. And the way that it would work in this scenario is that it would be similar to the entry exams for the recommendations, as Deku wouldn't really have too much, I guess, ways to win a lot of these physical abilities or physical kind of tasks, except for a few, and I'll get into that after a bit. So he would ask Aizawa if he could go last, as for his quirk to work, or for it to be the most efficient, he has to see everyone's quirk to be the best. So Aizawa, he wants to see the most that these quirks can do, so therefore he lets Deku be the last in every event, basically, so he could see everyone's ability. So what Deku does is he sees everyone's kind of abilities and what he can really copy. So what happens is he subconsciously thinks like, yo, I want to get this quirk, and then I want this quirk, and I want this quirk, not knowing that he's actually getting more than one ability, because at this point he's never really tried to get more than one ability, as well as he's never really had the opportunity to get more than one power. So during the race, he would copy things like Bakugo's explosion and Ida's kind of leg, or the jet, I forgot the exact term, but the calf engines that he has. So he would combine both of these, and Deku would be shocked that he's even able to do this. He's like, whoa, he only really wanted to get Ida's, or I think Bakugo's. I forgot which one came in first between those two, but he would only want to copy one of them, but he accidentally copied both, and he didn't even know he could do that. This is where Bakugo sees this, and it confirms what he thought at the beginning of the series, that Deku does have a quirk and he's been hiding it. So he confronts Deku, and Aizawa basically gets him off, and everyone's kind of shocked that he was able to do that, since before this he hasn't really shown anything, and they understand why he was last. So Ida's kind of like, he's a bit irritated that he took his power or copied him, and Deku's just like, what's the deal with it? It's my quirk. And Ida's just kind of irritated by this, and just stops talking to Deku. After that, it's the different kind of, I guess, kind of test. So in the kind of grip strength, I would say that Deku in this, I think that Deku will be able to copy, well, mutation quirks, and it would be treated as almost like a transformation. So he would be normal, and if he copied the power, he would transform to basically be the same as the person who has a mutation quirk. So he'd be able to copy Shinso's quirk, or not Shinso, Shoji's quirk with the multi-arm, and be able to basically get the same grip strength as Shoji, as this would be, because I believe it goes off of your physical strength, so it would be very similar to Shoji, but not as to the same effect, even though his quirk is a bit more enhanced. So he would basically tie for grip strength. In terms of push-ups, probably the same, as Shoji has the same, or has multi-arm to help him out, so he'd probably win in that as well. So when it comes to the ball throw, Deku would obviously get first with Uraraka, but his would seem a bit more impressive, as he would copy both Uraraka's quirk, that being zero gravity, as well as Bakugo's quirk, again, to basically shoot it even faster than before, combined with the force that he throws with the explosion and the zero gravity, basically giving no resistance. He would go even faster and not further than Uraraka, since both of them have zero gravity, but it would just look more impressive. So Deku would get number one in a lot of these scenarios, just because, or either number one or tied for first in a lot of these tests, just because of how his copy power works. And a lot of people would be impressed, but they would feel almost irrationally kind of mad, or so a few of them would, but others would be like, they'd be kind of like envious, not in a way that it has no real meaning behind it, if that makes sense. So yeah, with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. If you like it, please give it a like, and if you made it to the end of the video, please comment down CS, so I know that you support the channel. Please subscribe, as I'm trying to get to 7,000 at the end of the year. And with that being said, I gotta give a shout out to the Patreons over on patreon.com. So if you want to get these videos early, you could go down to the description and click on the link, patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan, and you can watch my videos a few days early than usual, as well as get a chance of getting a drawing from me. It only takes $1 to do so, but if you want to donate more, you can, and you have a higher chance of getting a drawing from me. So with that being said, let's shout them out. So in our gold tier, we have Whatiferi, Liam, Dwayne Fenn, Isaiah Prez, and Lyko. And in our platinum tier, we have Panaman 8. So like I said before, if you want to join them and become a patron, you go down in the description. Only takes $1, like I said. But I'm not forcing you. You don't have to do it. Just know that my content would always be free, and I will never make anything exclusive for Patreon for any longer than it has to. So with that being said, bye.